because it's Halloween.
Halloween.
We're doing a tour downtown tonight. So, hey, we are on. Heather Hansen, I am so ecstatic that you're here. What a week to have you here, too. We booked this a little over a month ago, and I read your book today and yesterday, and I just, thank you, Heather, for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sue. I am so excited to be welcome to moving to North Carolina in this way. I'm just delighted about it.
When did you actually make the move to North Carolina?
2 weeks ago, Thursday.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm pretty well settled.
Yeah, you look it. So you've been a lawyer for 20 something years.
Yes.
And it wasn't a big field for women to be in, but ironically enough, over the past couple of months, I've interviewed 4 or 5 authors that are also lawyers, and they're also female.
Oh,
so I love that.
Yeah.
And we interviewed a judge. He's a male, but Mark Davis, and he was wonderful too. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up.
So I grew up in Massachusetts, and my family, my mom and dad and my sister and her kids are still there, and I'm very close with them. My brother's in California, close to him too. I went to undergrad in DC at American University and majored in psychology. I thought I was going to be like Clarice in Silence of the Lambs, which is just beyond my comprehension now because it's dark and I don't like that stuff. It's like scary to me, but I was really interested in how people could be that way. And then in studying psychology, I realized that really what I was interested in was personal development, how to not be that way. And I was really obsessed with it, like all of the personal development books, Byron Katie and Wayne Dyer and all of that. And at the same time, I was really into acting and performing and speaking in public, and realized at the end of college that I didn't want to be Clarice anymore and thought that perhaps law school would be the answer. And so I went to law school knowing that if I was going to be a lawyer, I was going to be a trial lawyer. I didn't want to do contracts. I didn't want to do property or divorce, God forbid. I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. So
you have that personality, like I can't see you behind a desk doing all that stuff. You are definitely where you're supposed to be. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I was for a very long time. It felt that way. I mean, that's a really good way to put it. It felt immediately, I was really lucky. I started working at a firm that did medical malpractice defense when I was in law school. And that was just pure serendipity. But medical malpractice defense was so interesting to me because I have a body. So when I would talk to the doctors about knee replacements or, different types of cancer or breast surgeries, I could understand it. It was interesting to me. It wasn't like construction that I didn't know or pharma that I didn't know. And so immediately I fell in love with it. And I was really lucky that soon after passing the bar, I was able to try my first case. Because as you can imagine, who wants a new lawyer trying their case? It's sort of like a new doctor doing their surgery, right? Yeah. Nobody wants to be the first. So once I had the first one under my belt, the rest just kept coming. And I loved every minute of it.
Yeah. So where in Massachusetts did you grow up? Because I grew up in Salem.
Oh, great. Gosh, I used to go to Salem all the time for all of the Salem witch stuff this time of year. I grew up in Foxborough, which is where the Patriots play.
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
Very pretty. So you moved to New York and you were a trial lawyer there. How long were you in Manhattan doing that? Because that's a high stress level. And then you're a lawyer on top of that.
So my law practice is in Philadelphia. Which is
right. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's okay. But it's interesting because Philadelphia is one of the worst venues for doctors. The juries tend to not. So just generally, and this is just generalities, guys, generally, the more conservative places tend to be more doctor sympathetic, and the less conservative places tend to be more patient sympathetic. And Philadelphia is a pretty liberal city. And so it was named a judicial hellhole by a bunch of lawyers who name these things because it's a very difficult place for doctors to try cases. But that's where I practiced. I moved to Manhattan to do television.
So you've done everything.
It's funny, like I do feel a little bit, I was reading about that big book about Ben Franklin. Was it McCullough who wrote it? And all the things that he did over the course of his life. And I was like, oh, I understand that. But I do feel as though I always want to keep learning. Lee Iacocca once said something to the effect that to grow, you have to replant yourself every few years.
Mhm.
And because I stayed in the same job, I stayed at the same firm, Sue, from
Yeah.
94 when I started through today. So I had to find other ways to get stimulated.
And you did. And you talk about that in your book, about the curiosity you have, because I think we all, I always say when you go to the mall and you're looking for a black blouse, you're not going to find that black blouse. But if you go to the mall and you're looking for a blouse, you're able to find like a whole bunch of different things that you want. And you look at a case like that, and I don't like them all. So I'm just using that as an example. But you said you went into it with a curiosity when you went to look at a case and went to look at what you were looking for. You kept an open mind, and you would find things that nobody else did.
That's right.
And I love that curiosity.
It's a really good point, and you have to. You know, one of the things I told you before we started that I just handed in my second book. So sometimes the two books, like I have this book in front of me because I wanted to make sure I was referring. Oh, I love it. But I think that, you know, one of the things that my clients would sometimes struggle with is that I would constantly be pointing out the other side's arguments. And they would be like, well, you're supposed to be on my side. But I think that part of winning is knowing what you're up against and being prepared for all of the sides. And that takes real curiosity to sort of try to see everything that's available to you, not just what you want to see.
Well, you must have been a big reader too, because I think reading promotes empathy and compassion. So readers have that. And now you're a writer.
Reading is it's my superpower. I'm a fast reader.
Right.
When I was little, they took me out of class and they used to have me like read words off of walls and see how fast I could read. And I was a voracious reader since I was a little kid. I was, my mom would tell me to put down my book and go outside and play.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, under the covers. I looked into owning a bookstore, but there are so many things I have from your book that I just quoted. Tell us about, you worked for an uncle. Mm-hmm. And then one of your first trials, I can't remember if it was your first trial, but one of the first things you did was you were talking to a friend's dad, Mr. P.
Yes.
And you liked him and you've worked with him and you have a good relationship with him still. But there was something he said and dropped a bomb on you when you were a young girl. I'm just saying because you were in your 20s and you had a law degree and everything. But how did you feel? And could you tell us a little background to that story?
Yeah, I think that as a young woman, especially then, so we're talking about 1994, 5, 6, 7, there weren't a lot of other women in that field. Even today, trial attorneys, not attorneys in general, but trial attorneys, less than 5% of them are women. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a lot of examples of how to handle what we now would call like the Time's Up or Me Too movement, that type of thing.
Yeah.
This was a situation where in the courtroom, someone said something really inappropriate, and then my friend laughed, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to respond. You know, I can remember like viscerally, like the heat goes up in your face starts red, you don't know what to do, you start to feel sweaty. And in retrospect, I did what I often now counsel my clients to do, my clients who come to me for counseling and coaching. And that is, I asked a question. So rather than sort of attack and go crazy, I said, you know, what are you doing? And then I said, I don't think that's funny. And I don't know, people, especially young women, often ask me where I got the wherewithal to say it that way. I don't know. What I now counsel my clients to do is to prepare for something like that. So to have something in your head when you are faced with a similar situation, more practiced. Because in those moments, you don't know what's going to come out. And a lot of times, as a result, what comes out is angry or fitful or tears, you know, all of which is fine. But if you want to control what's going to come out, practicing it can help. So I look back on that moment with pride of that girl. Yes. And also knowing that it was just luck that day. And so I have young nieces who I would encourage to have responses to moments like that so that when they get into them, they don't lose them.
Right. Because somebody will say something to me and it's an insult and they think I'll give one example. People will tell me your hair looks so much better straight. You're like, I've tried everything and I do mean everything from thousands of dollars to whatever, but you never know what to say. And I read a book and I practice. Okay, well, plastic surgery will make me look better too. So you don't have to be the B word
Right.
Because a lot of people, like if you do fight for yourself or stand up for yourself, we're automatically categorized as the B word, you know, and they're just so hateful and spiteful. We could say the same thing as a man in the same tone, but we're spiteful. So you're taking the elegance and the step back approach is very helpful.
Yeah, I think that it's a choice, right? You can choose to be, and I think that that's my point about those moments, because in those moments, it's a reaction and not a response.
Yes.
And my advice in this book, my hope that people will leave with, is to try to make it a choice. I think that our lives are choices, and the root of the word elegance is to choose, and that's why the book was so important to me that it be called The Elegant Warrior.
Yes.
The editor didn't want it to be called The Elegant Warrior. We fought about that. But it was important to me because I think that, you choose everything. You choose what time you get up in the morning. You choose what side of the bed you get up on. You choose whether to greet your partner with a smile or a frown. Many of my coaching clients will tell me, oh, it's not a choice, but it is. Yeah. And in those moments, it's a choice as well. And the choice says more about you than it says about the other person. Right. And it stays with you. How you respond, like you, Sue, whether you know it or not, you are a better woman for having responded that way and having been thoughtful about how you wanted to respond. And I think that you then also serve as an example to anyone who watches. Right.
And I think if you react more than just think about it and say something nicely, like they shut down, and I think we were talking a little bit before, once you start having a conversation with people and then you start with insults or putting people down, that conversation is over. It's not a conversation anymore. And you're not going to make the other person see your side. So
I think that that's absolutely right. You have no influence over people you don't understand. Yeah. And you have to work to understand them even if you don't want to. I always say, so I do television and I am an equal opportunity talking head. So I will do MSNBC, I will do CNN, and I will do Fox. And I think that that is the greatest gift, because I can see things from their perspective. And this is actually, a lot of this is in the next book. I can see things from their perspective, and that gives me more opportunity to change it. But doing that by attacking or by insulting or by even arguing most of the time isn't going to be effective. It's understanding and then asking questions and sort of being covert about it. You're almost like, maybe the next book should be The Elegant Ninja.
I would like that. We also need to have a conversation and listen too, because I think if people feel respected and listened to, they're more open too. So
absolutely.
Yes.
And to show that you're listening. The next book has a whole chapter on questions, because when you ask questions, you have so much power. In The Elegant Warrior, I talk about actually one of people's favorite parts of the book is the story about Judge Aquilina and her question. So questions are really powerful.
Yes. So tell us about your lineage, because you talk about your grandmother, and she was a social worker when many women didn't work out of the home. And she put on her lipstick and she had her heels and she walked down the hall. I respect her just for leading the way and changing things for our women.
She was just everything to me. It's funny because I just moved to Durham and I went to, I made a doctor's appointment, and unbeknownst to me, it was at a clinic, which is totally fine, but not my normal doctor's appointment, right? So I called my mom afterwards, and my mom was like, it sounds like the clinics where your grandmother used to work. So my grandmother was a social worker, and she went in and worked in clinics. And what my mom told me that either I didn't know or didn't remember is that there are at least 5 women out there who my grandmother is their godmother. Hispanic, African-American, all these women who back in that time, it was not really the norm to have this Caucasian stately lady be your godmother when you were, in a totally different world. But my grandmother was in their world, and they loved her and she loved them. And she rocked those earrings and the high heels, and she wanted me to do the same. Even if I was going to the gym, it would be wear your earrings and where's your lipstick.
And I love that. So you talk on page 6, because I took a lot of notes here and I have a lot of paper, because I'm like, I was having a day, you feel a little beat up sometimes when you own your own small business. And for the most part, it's wonderful. Then you hit the wall every once in a while. Yeah. So this book came at the perfect time. And I'm so thankful I had you to interview today. But you said, elegance is available to men and women, baby boomers and millennials. It is the ability to be true to yourself, both who you are and who you feel destined to be. Yeah. And that's not, oh, I'm walking in a suit that's tailored, and it's who you are, what you feel comfortable in. Yeah.
That's right. And who you want to be. A big part of what people come to me now for is to help them with imposter syndrome, especially women. And they feel as though, like, I'm not, yeah, exactly. Like, I am not, well, everything I want to be, everything I pretend to be. And I always say, it's not, you don't have imposter syndrome. You have aspiration syndrome. It's who you want to be. You want to be the expert. You want to be the lawyer. The first time I tried a case, I had never tried a case. I could have had imposter syndrome, but it's aspiration. And so I think I often say to people, especially in talks, that it's when Michelangelo carved David out of that block of marble, other people had tried to do it and had not been able to do it. They couldn't get through the marble. And when people asked Michelangelo how he did it, he said, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set him free. And I think our elegance is the angel in the marble. It's the best of us. It's our potential. And so carving until you set her free is taking away all of the insecurity and all of the doubt and all of the crap that we build on and take on from other people in childhood, and when we react instead of responding. And it's always a choice that's available to us.
Oh, and you talk about choices all the time. I love that. There's a chapter, the first chapter is about complaining. And I had somebody that came in to work and they would complain, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And it drained you. There was no solution. It was just complaints, and you felt inferior and beaten down. And that's not okay, and I reacted and I talked, but at the same time, it was just more, oh my God. Yeah. So what do you suggest? Because you also talk about the psychology of it, that complaining becomes a habit. It becomes part of you.
That's right. It becomes a neural pathway. I think the first thing is being conscious that too is a choice.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to that because it really is everything. If you've read, we're a bunch of book people here, right? So if you've read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, or if you've read The Choice and the Gift by Edith Eger, these books talk about people who have been through the Holocaust and have chosen to see the world differently, even in those situations.
Yes.
And those choices are what allow them to survive. And so the idea of choosing not to complain, and it's hard. It is a neural pathway. And so now with my clients, Sue, what I tell them is, okay, you can give 50% of your time to complaining, but you've got to give 50% of your time to being joyful and extolling and praising, because otherwise that neural pathway is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's just where your brain is going to go every single time.
And there was another point in the book when you're talking, I think it's in this chapter, but you were talking about you were 100 pounds overweight in high school and you were singing in the gym, and another girl came out of the bathroom, and you're like, what are you singing about? And you're like, well, why am I singing? And then you and I had a primo ballerina that moved here from Manhattan, and she's amazing. And she goes, when you're feeling bad, just dance. Just dance and sing. And you can't be mad. You can't be sad. You can't get back in that world. So that is phenomenal. Do you still sing?
I do. I walk around the house singing all the time, and I walked around high school singing all the time. And there's research that shows that we have a certain set point of happiness. And so some people struggle with that more than others. And I don't want to discount that. I'm fortunate that I was born with a high set point for happiness. My mom is the same way. But there are so many things that you can do to raise it. One of them is singing. Research shows that that's true. One of them is also dancing. So your prima ballerina was 100% correct. Yeah. There's all kinds of things: yoga, meditation, reading, spending time with others, having a pet. There's things that you can do, choices you can make that are going to allow you to reach that happiness a little bit more quickly.
True. And now that leads me to another chapter, not right in a row, but fake it till you make it is not something you do. What were your words of wisdom?
I love show it till you grow it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that we all have that angel in the marble, right? Yeah. We all have that piece inside of us that we know is good and special. And whether it's your sense of humor or your style or your weirdness, for some people it's just the fact that they're weird. Whatever that is, when you start to show that, people feed off of it. And then that energy of people paying you attention and looking at you and smiling at you, and the tone of voice they use with you. It gives you more oxygen, and then it grows. And so I never, in the courtroom, Sue, if I told a client to fake happiness or to fake being cozy, the jury would hate them. Like, it wouldn't just be it would be really a major problem, because the jury knows fake. And once you've lost credibility with the jury, you've lost everything. So instead, I would try to bring out those little things, that little bit of compassion, that little sense of humor. And the more that they showed it, the more the jury would respond, and then it would grow.
Yeah, that's so true. Who are your mentors along the line? Are there people that you looked up to when you were young? Like Mother Teresa was always a big one. I went to Catholic school, so she was one. Gloria Steinem, I got to meet her, and I walked into the coffee shop next door, and there were two girls, and they were like, I'm going to go meet Gloria Steinem. And they said, who's that? I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
When they're in their 20s, but she's phenomenal, and I remember my mother not having a checkbook or access to a credit card in the 70s. So times have changed, and because of people like her, we're riding on their shoulders.
Absolutely. We ride on all of our ancestors' shoulders. My mom and my grandmother were huge influences in my life, and my grandmother on my dad's side as well. As far as like more well-known people, I loved the Oprah show. I loved, oh my gosh, every day. I mean, I loved it. And then when like she came out with those DVDs of all the old seasons, I bought it all. I loved the Oprah show. And there's a lot of things that I loved about it. When she had to confront people, she always maintained her elegance and her composure and her tone of voice. And that's what I would sometimes imagine on cross-examination or when things got bad. But also early in my career, when I was young, I heard her tell this story about how she knew she couldn't be Barbara Walters. She had to be her Oprah. Like, she had to be herself. And that was something that stuck with me, because as a young lawyer, the temptation is to be, my biggest mentor in the courtroom was John O'Brien. I had all my cases with him. I learned everything I know practically from him. But I didn't want to be just like him. I couldn't. He's like a 6'4", 200 and something pound ex-DEA agent who carries a gun. Like, that is not going to be me. And so Oprah actually, and then through Oprah, I found Dr. Angelou, and she has always been a source. I love her books. I love any podcast that she had, or any recording that she was on. So those are two that I could look to and say they had a huge impact. And
she lived in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah. Her words are beautiful. So you did talk about mentoring. It was like, find a mentor. You didn't have many growing up because there weren't a lot of women in the law field. So how did you find your mentors, men and women?
I was really lucky because John O'Brien became a mentor very quickly. I was in school and he let me come with him to trials. And then I think he liked my work ethic and I had a fire in my belly. That's what everyone would always say about me when I was young. You have a fire in your belly. Because I would be like, let me come, let me do it. I can do this. And then I can do the other stuff on the weekend. And so that fell into me just sitting through trials, Sue, watching him and like figuring out what he might need next. And so I knew he liked black pens, a certain kind of black pen at trial. So I'd carry them in my bag and like hand him one before he asked. And that allowed me he wanted me there more and more. And so I got more and more mentorship. But
M&Ms.
Like that, yes, exactly. And coked and lots of sleepless nights, which have probably contributed to my gray hairs and my wrinkles now, but well worth it. I think too that, like in one of the chapters, I talk about Judge Moss, who was a judge who at the time, I wouldn't have said she was a mentor. But now looking back, I looked for people and women to give me something. So it wasn't like, I feel the same way about friends. You're not going to get everything you need from one person, whether it's your partner or your best friend. So you look to people and say, well, that I can take. You make your own quilt. Like, I'm going to take her sense of style and her confidence and his motivation and his calm under pressure. Like John was so calm under pressure. And then I'm going to take a little bit of Heather and combine that all together to be the trial attorney that I'm meant to be.
Yes. So what do you look for in certain people? Do you say, just besides style, compassion, loyalty, are there things you take from everybody or is there one certain aspect you want in everybody?
That word elegance comes back to me, but also integrity. Just today, so I still practice law, and today I had plans that totally went to pot because of something that happened in one of my cases. And the attorney on the other side isn't acting with integrity. I'll just say that. And it's so interesting to me, and I talk about this quite a bit in The Elegant Warrior, because ultimately you have to look yourself in the mirror every day and know that you have been who you want to be. And so I really did always look for people who were doing their best. I mean, listen, we all make mistakes. There are certainly going to be days where you look back and say, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that. If you weren't doing that, we wouldn't be growing. But I looked for people who were trying to reach that angel in the marble, always trying to get better. And to watch them, especially if they were just one step or two ahead of me, there would be, and sometimes that was even better. Like John was 20 steps ahead of me. But those young attorneys who were just 1 or 2 steps ahead of me, I could almost see their footsteps and get there a little bit more quickly. So I was looking for people who were looking to improve.
This is apple cider, by the way, because it's fall today.
I love it. We got the Halloween, you got the apple cider. It's perfect.
It is. You say in the book on page 33, remember too that every mentee is a mentor. And I do take that to heart, and I totally agree with it. I have a couple mentors that are also women that own bookstores, and they're ahead of me, again, by 20 steps. And I look to them for everything. You know, I can bounce an idea off them, and we're all supportive of each other. And that's what makes a huge difference to me, is the support that you get from them, and it's honesty. It's not competitive, you know, and I like to be a little competitive, but most of the time it's, what can I do to help you? And I will do anything, you know, for you to help, you know.
One of the people who's here watching is my friend Darlene, and I was out to
dinner.
Hi, Darlene. Hi, Darlene. And she was saying she has this fabulous group called Goal Friends, and it's this group of women who support each other. And even if, what I think is really special, Sue, and we often don't know our superpowers, but the fact that you are so supportive and in this group with women who some would see as your competition is really special. It's really special. And that's something that you don't get in the law, because you really are competition, right? Like you are, if the person's on the other side, we are adversaries. We're friendly, and I'm friendly with most of my opposing counsel. But I think it's so wonderful if you can have that, because there is, I believe, that we live in an abundant universe, and there is enough for everyone. And the more that you share, the more that you get.
Yes. So if you had that girl that never got out of the 7th grade, that is still competitive and still, how do you deal with those people? You know, because, and I feel bad for them, but it still infiltrates your life by them trying to put you down. And it seems I take more offense to another woman doing that to another woman than I do from a man doing it, because I could just blow him off. But it hurts my soul when another woman I see doing it or feel doing it.
Yeah. My biggest, I called her my nemesis throughout my career, was a woman. And I think in retrospect, we are now friendly, which is interesting. I would say we're friends, but we're friendly, especially on social media. But it's interesting because I think that she was older. She is older than me. And I think that sometimes there's that competition because we as women, we both worked even harder than the men did. We worked similarly. So I think we were so much alike that it sort of also made us butt heads. But I think that, I mean, there's a couple of ways that I see those types of women. With her, I saw her as a worthy adversary. And it's a little bit of a different world, because I always say the courtroom is different than real life. There's a winner and a loser. And there's not many jobs and there's not many situations where that's true. But I think in real life, with those types of women, what I try to remind myself is that there's their business and my business. What they think and what they do. I just actually did a podcast about this, about other people's business. The more time that I spend in other people's business, the worse my business goes.
Yes.
If I'm thinking about what they think of me, or what they think about what I'm wearing, or what they said about what I'm wearing, or what they commented on my Facebook post, or whatever, I'm in their business. And if I'm in their business and they're in their business, who's in my business?
Exactly.
My business needs the help.
But it's funny, like a lot of times we take things personally, or we go down that rabbit hole. We can have 100 compliments and 1 negative comment, and we just focus on that. And there are just days where that eats away at you. But most of the time it's good. So let's not pay any mind to that.
Well, that's it. And I think that you can take from it what will be constructive to you and leave the rest. But that also takes time. We're impatient with ourselves. We feel like I should know everything right away. It takes, because oftentimes those things sting. And then if you let it sit for a minute, instead of reacting and freaking out, by the next day, you might be like,
Right. So you talk about this one judge. I can't find my pink paper where it's in, but you talk about this one lawyer that would continually dress in the bland conservative suits and, no jewelry. She just looked always conservative and ready to go to work. She didn't want to like stand out with the men with her jewelry that she loved. And I think she thought she was being judged by being extravagant or frilly or ladylike. But she went to a meeting one time, went to change, and all of her jewelry had been stolen. And she was supposed to be going to a cocktail party. And she said, after that day, I'm never doing that. And then she became known for the woman who always looked like $1 million.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it was a judge. It was actually a judge.
I love a judge. Okay.
She's an icon. This is Judge Moss. She's an icon.
Oh, okay.
When I was a young attorney in front of her, I was petrified of her, and she was tough as nails. But now we are friendly, and she allowed me to put that in the book, and we talk often. She's an icon. But she's an icon for a million reasons. She was a single mom who went back to law school, and this was she's probably in her, gosh, I hope she's not watching. She's probably in her early 70s. But she thought she had to wear a certain uniform. And she wore that uniform. And then that day happened where she had put her jewelry in the room. She was at a judge's convention and went to change for the cocktail party, and it was gone. And she realized that she was never going to hide who she was again. But now she wears like 5 brooches and earrings, and I mean, she's got it all going on. But she's a mentor for sure. She's an icon.
Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like nobody had those collars like she did. It's just, and she was iconic and she spoke her mind. Like not everybody has to believe in everything she believed in or what she said, but she was a force, and
absolutely
breaks my heart. Yeah.
And also she was, I think that right time, right place, right person. She changed the way that we see women. We changed the way that we see, women for sure in a million different ways, but also how we see older women. The fact that she continued to work until she died, really. There's so many things that we will look back and say, she changed a lot for women and men too.
Yeah. And even going to law school, like she went after she had her child and they moved to Harvard and both of them went, that was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She always said that she couldn't have done it without her partner. She had a great relationship with her husband, and really something special all around there.
Yes. And their daughters are better for it. Her daughter and granddaughters are better for it too. And
absolutely.
And us. So on page 95, you're talking about the summary of the case. And for some of us, learning to object is one of the hardest lessons of all, because as girls we're taught, and I've seen studies done where the girls are told, no, you can't say that. And the boys are like, oh, boys will be boys. Yep. So how do you get over that? Because I think sometimes I had 2 sons, and I never want to teach them that. But, do you know what I'm saying?
You know what you're saying. And it's really interesting because, and I remember especially, so this book came out in April of 2019. And at the time when I was doing a lot of speaking, I have a lot of I'm 48. I have a lot of younger friends in their 20s, and then I have a lot of friends who are older as well. And one thing that I found that was really interesting is that for myself and my generation and probably up, we were reluctant to object. We didn't want to speak up. We didn't want to say, I don't like that. We didn't want to rock the boat, all of those things. And the younger generation were looking for objections. And so I think that there's a fine line between the two. I think that sometimes with the younger generation, they were always looking for reasons to be offended. And if you're looking for reasons to be offended, you're going to find them. And then at the same time, the older people were offended, and rightfully so, and not objecting to it. And I think that, I tell the story in the book about my first objection and how I sort of went up and down and up and down. And then the judge gave me the eye, which finally gave me the confidence to object. And I think that that's actually a great example of my imposter syndrome. It was my first trial, and it was like, who am I to be objecting? I don't know what I'm doing. There's that feeling, I don't know what I'm doing. I do think the way that you learn to object and when to object and how to object is to look back at things that give you that confidence to speak up. Right. And also, what works for me is my nieces. So for another great book, and we're book people, so I'll talk books. It's over here somewhere. It's called Ask for More by Alex Carter. I just interviewed her for my podcast. It'll come out like in 2 weeks. But it looks like you read the book. It's a really good book. And one of the things that really hit me is that I'll make the story very short. She was in a job interview and they offered her more than what she wanted. And so good for her. I probably would have been like, okay, good. Thank you. Bye. But she decided to wait. And so she called her mentor, who was a woman, and the woman said, ask for more. And she was like, ask for more. They're giving me more. And she's like, ask for more. And I'm paraphrasing. Ask for more for the women who will come up behind you.
Yes.
And so I oftentimes will object for my nieces because I'm like, I can handle this. I've handled worse, between all the lawyers I dealt with and then doctors, it's a world of men, but I don't want my nieces to have to handle it. I don't want them to have to handle that and studying the law, that and studying how to be a trial attorney. So if I object, maybe they won't have to.
Oh, I love you. Sorry. So we're going to ask a few more questions here. I just want to remind everybody that you can put questions in the chat bar. I know Fran Shapiro is here, and she is a badass. I've met her in our book clubs. She has 2 younger sisters, too, and they're all badasses. There's a green buy the book button, and we are going to arrange to meet with Heather and get some food, because we love food, and have you personalize and sign the book. So just let us know, too, if you want one. Couple more questions, because we went way over time. Not we're over time, but I knew you and I would just chat. Yeah. You're saying close with respect. So there's a lot of thought process that go into having a conversation. Do you just get used to this? Or
yeah, you do get used to it. And sometimes it's weird. It's weird for my clients for sure, because they are the doctors who have been sued. You can think what you want about doctors or whatever, but they go to work every day to help people. And they're sued. It is highly personal. And so when we walk into the courtroom and I'm chit-chatting with opposing counsel, it's really difficult for them. But one of the things that I try to make them understand is it serves them if I can have respect with opposing counsel. And I think that when you are adversaries, you can still respect each other. That woman, the attorney who I called my nemesis, I probably have more respect for her as an attorney than anyone else I've ever been up against. And I also think that when you treat others, especially your adversaries, with respect, you can have more respect for yourself.
Yes.
You can actually be the angel in the marble because you're achieving your highest potential.
Yes. I totally agree with that. And you get more bees with honey, just
Absolutely.
That whole thing. Like if you want to have a conversation, you don't, like we said, again, you don't call people names or bully them or keep talking. You listen and show respect.
Listening is so important. So in the next book, I have the 10 tools of an advocate. And the last tool is arguing, and it's the last resort because you don't convince, one of the things I say there is that, now you're getting a sneak peek in the next book.
I can't wait.
I was saying there is that when the best time to argue is when a third party decides.
Yes.
So if you are vying for someone else for a sale or a client or a customer, then you might want to argue there. Or for me in the courtroom, it makes sense because the judge decides or the jury decides. But you arguing to convince the other, the person you're arguing against, I don't know if I've ever seen that be successful, Sue.
No, it's not. I don't think. Your last chapter is Embrace Rejection. No. Let's talk about that. Do you do crossword puzzles and you pace?
I love crossword puzzles. I love crossword puzzles. I don't know. I think that rejection it's been one of the gifts of being a lawyer because you lose sometimes and you have no choice but to go back to work. You have no choice but to try the next case. And I've been fortunate that I can count the number of cases I lost on one hand, but I remember everything about those cases. And I learned more from those cases than I probably did from the wins. And there's a story that I don't think is in the book, but I may not be remembering, but it's a great story and it's worth repeating. After I lost my first case, my first lawsuit was a big one. And so, my cases are often catastrophic injuries. And so my first case, it was something over $2 million that the patient was awarded. And this was in probably the early 2000s. So it was more money back then as well. And I was so embarrassed and I didn't want to go back to the office and it gets around and people talk and, it was terrible. And an attorney, other defense attorney who I wasn't friends with, and it was a guy, because that's what was, he called me and he said, I saw your verdict. And I was like, oh, great, thanks. And he said, just remember, if you're not losing, you're not trying the tough stuff.
Right.
That has stayed with me with everything. Like so many people have said, why are you moving to Durham? I'm trying the tough stuff. I'm going outside my comfort zone. That's why I've started this new practice where I help mainly women to advocate for themselves and their ideas. Like I want to keep trying the tough stuff. And that means that sometimes I will lose. That's part of the game. And so you have to be willing to accept that.
You are so right. So my dear sister, who is your age and from Massachusetts, is a genius. And her partner at the time said, women lawyers won't make much money. You shouldn't do that. And I regret that for her because she's brilliant, but she's found her way. She's happy. I love that. But I hate that was a thing 25 years ago, you know, and I'm so glad you became a lawyer and I can't wait to show her this and give her this book. So you say, prove it. There's a lot of research showing that rejection hurts. It's in an actual physical pain, as anyone who has ever had their heart broken knows as well. You shouldn't underestimate the physical effect that rejection have on us. Sometimes you need help along life, where it's a mentor or a psychologist or whatever, but hitting a low can make you go high. So how do you get that through to somebody when they're just feeling their worst?
I think that is so true. I always think of the bow and arrow, and the bow has to be pulled back before it can move forward. I think that, first of all, sometimes you have to feel the feelings. There's no way out but through. And you so often don't want to feel those feelings. Like I am a crier. And on the cases that I've lost, I have bawled my way home. Like should have taken a cab, Sue, let's be honest. Walking home from City Hall, just bawling. But I think that you have got to feel it to heal it. And then once you've felt it, and one of the things I do now with my clients is say, like, what does it feel like? Where is it in your body? And they don't want to, they want to get past it, but you can't. When things are bad, when you've been rejected or you've lost someone, you've got to feel it. And then you can start to choose again. Like, will I choose to get out of bed today? Will I choose to? And the other thing that I often do is to tell myself a different story about it. Because we don't know, whether this thing is ultimately for the good or for the bad. Maybe this loss, oftentimes in my cases, what I will tell myself is that the patient who won the money is going to, this sounds crazy, but I will tell myself that they're going to use the money to educate their children, who are then going to find the cure for cancer. So in my head, it is ultimately for the greater good. And you never know what's for the greater good. So
you should look back and say, yes, it was, but you don't know while you're going through it.
That's right. And so you got to reframe it. You've got to choose a different story. And there's always a different story available.
Well, you mentioned like people being in the Holocaust and like overcoming things. And, there's people with hangnails that don't overcome it. We had a second and third grade book club that read Matilda, and they had the most philosophical conversation, these little second graders, about, are people born good or are they born bad? You have mentioned that you're lucky. I lost count of how many times that you're fortunate, you're lucky, you're this. Is that something you were instilled with? Because a lot of people, I'm so unlucky. Oh, there's a cloud hanging over me and everything. Like, because you're open and you feel lucky, I think you get better things. Like, not to quote The Secret, but something like that, but were you born like that?
I think I come by it genetically. My mom, but my parents know that I say this about them. So my dad tends to see scarcity. My mom tends to see abundance. I'm more like my mom. And it's a choice. And it sometimes is a curse, because when you feel lucky, sometimes you feel like, when's the shoe going to drop? Like that Brene Brown talks about this. Like when you have those moments of just pure joy, you're like, oh my God, something's going to happen. But I do think that you can choose to feel lucky. You can choose to see the good in things, and you can tell yourself a different story. And that practice doing that makes you better at it, and it becomes more natural to you.
Yes. Well, check her podcast out, check her website out. Can you give us that information so they can find it?
The best way to find all of my things is at Heather Hansen with an EN presents.com. So all my podcasts will be there. I do blogs. I used to do a video every week. Now it's less often, but every week I do send out an email with book recommendations and podcast recommendations and a little bit of my thought leadership stuff. So if you want to sign up for that, you can do that on the website as well. And the new book comes out in May.
I am so excited.
By then we can meet in person and talk about it.
Yes, So I'm in a couple women's groups. It's a women in networking meeting, which is a sisterhood. And then I'm also in the Chamber of Commerce meetings. And I am going to recommend, we're going to try to write a grant and get this book into everybody's hands because, you know, we need each other as women and we need to go forward. And not that we're beating up men. I feel like we need to be on each other's side. And I adore you. And all your pictures on your website and everything are just you being genuinely happy. You know, I mean, you're beautiful, but you really exude a warmth and tenderness and kindness. And yeah, I can't wait to actually meet you in person because I needed this book. I didn't just love it. I just needed it. So Heather, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? Fran, Liz, Darlene? No? Well, we do have Buy the Book. We're going to meet Heather and she is going to sign the copies. If you want it personalized, just send us a message or you can go right on to our page 158 book. Heather Hansen, not related to the Hansen brothers.
No.
Thank you so much for being here. You want to sing, bop, bop, bop. It's coming up.
I love, my brother was like a total Hansen fan. So I know almost all of the songs.
Well, let's leave out with you singing. Oh, Darlene wants to know when your next book is releasing. It's May.
It's May, right around Memorial Day. You know, these things are always a little bit fluffy, but that's what it looks like.
So it'll be a Tuesday, right? Because that's when new books are released.
Yeah. Yep.
And honestly, if we could do a pre-order for you, maybe have you out in the store so you can come in and sign our bathroom. I mean,
I can't wait to be there with all of you and hopefully be able to give everyone a hug. If masks on or not, I can't wait.
Yes. I can't thank you all enough for being here. We are going to replay this on our YouTube channel and our social media. Heather, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
What a gift.